Hello, everybody out there. It is Tuesday, April 21st, 2020. Mr. Parrot here, and it is a great day to be a junior podder. What we've got going on Tuesday here, same old up top with the general announcements. We've got the attendance form. Make sure you're filling that out by 11 a.m. each day. Remember, I'm going to try to do just one post a day. That way it kind of limits your emails that you are receiving on a daily basis instead of the two posts usually. So I'm going to put it all in one. So what you're going to see is just the assignment go up, because today there's an assignment on the classroom. So I'm going to put the schedule in where it would usually be like the instructions. I'm going to put the schedule in there, and then the instructions are actually on the document. The video and everything is going to be posted there as well. So everything that you will need is going to be on the assignment page there. So make sure you're checking those things out, because I'm only going to be doing one thing a day. I switched the settings, so hopefully it shows up as something a little bit different for you, and you see the whole rundown of everything on the main page. I clicked a couple of options, so hopefully that works for you as well. Let me know if it does. Otherwise, I'll keep going back to the posting 2 things a day, but I want to try to reduce the amount of emails that's coming into you. So hopefully you're watching today's video. And we're going to first take a look at the Pear Deck stuff from yesterday to make sure that we're all good as far as the Pear Deck stuff went before we dive into the food chains, webs, and energy pyramids worksheet for today. So we're going to go through some of the answers for some of these slides here. First, starting off with the first one here with producers. Producers are those things like plants, things that get energy from the sun. So it says to list 5 specific ones. 5 specific ones could be things like, grass, a tree, apple, maple, oak. Could be your different types of flowers. All those things would count as different things that would be producers that exist out there. Basically, anything's getting energy from the sun. The next one would be our decomposers. These are things primarily like mushrooms, fungi, bacteria. Their main thing is going to be that they break down waste and dead things, which are important things to be a part of life, because we don't want to be walking around with dead stuff everywhere. That's not going to be a good thing. They help decompose or break down some of that stuff and return some of those nutrients back to the soil, so that things like plants and stuff can end up using them. So they're not going to give directly energy for it, but they will give some of the other nutrients to things like producers. The next one with our consumers. Consumers are basically things that can't make their own food. They have to eat something in one way or another. Or maybe not necessarily eat, but they get their energy from somewhere else, not the sun. They have to go and seek it out. They can't make it by just absorbing the sunlight. So they have to go and eat something typically. Or like in mushrooms, absorb something, because decomposers would also count as a type of consumer in some kind of weird way, because they don't traditionally get it from the sun. They would be considered what this heterotroph means, which is a different food. They need to get something besides themselves. Things that would be, native to us that would be consumers is any type of animal. So your different birds out there, robins, bunnies are different mammals out there, foxes, things that are native to Illinois. You could even include like your dog or cat in there. Humans obviously would also be consumers, because we are a part of that as well, going through it. We got our different types of consumers, your different options on there. I believe the option was deer that you would have went with if you were looking for which one of those is an herbivore. Some of those on that list are things like omnivores, which are things that eat both plants and animals, but carnivores eat only meat eaters or other animal eaters. Omnivore eat both plants and other animals. And then we got scavengers, which eat the dead organisms. So how are they different than each other? That scavengers usually eat the dead stuff. They eat the stuff that's going through the decaying process typically, or stuff that's already been dead. They don't actually actively sometimes hunt their food. They wait for things to come around for them. Other examples of things that would be things like omnivores. There's a bunch of other different types of birds besides crows that exist out there that will go and eat stuff. Basically anything that'll eat any type of berry, but also eats insects. Those things would be high up there, because insects do count as a type of meat, because they're another type of animal. So if they eat insects, they are still a carnivore, or in some cases, an omnivore. Other examples could be things like skunks. We got bears. That includes all types of bears, polar bears, panda bears. Koalas would be another one on that list. So lots of different things reach into things like foxes would also be omnivores because they do tend to get a little bit of maybe a berry here or there when they're eating. Scavengers, some other examples of scavengers would be things like, that are not on that list, things like a raccoon would be an example of a scavenger. And things like a hyena, in some cases, can be considered to be a scavenger. The tricky thing with scavengers is that scavengers don't always rely on things to just be dead. They sometimes do actively still have to hunt as well, but most of the time they'll just rely on eating the bodies of something that could be dead. They have the capability of doing so. Their stomachs can handle it, as opposed to some of our other stomachs won't be able to handle that kind of process there. Now this one didn't have a question to it, it's just the different parts of our food chain. We start off with the producer, we go into the primary consumer, the secondary consumer, and then the tertiary consumer. But where you needed it was for this one here, so I'm going to run down where everything is at in the food chain. First thing, the secondary consumer is the bird, because the producer would be the grass. The primary consumer is the cricket or the grasshopper, whatever you want to call that thing there. It should be a cricket. But some of you came up with some different responses for it. The decomposer is actually the mushroom. We wanted to add that on there just so that you can see the decomposer role in there. It really could fall in between any of these spaces because it would break down all dead matter. So all of these would actually go back to the mushroom when everything's all said and done. The herbivore is also the cricket, since it is eating the grass in this case. And then the omnivore, you could look at the omnivore as being something like the bird, or also the cricket is sometimes known to eat an insect or two that are smaller than him. So the cricket and the bird are sometimes called omnivores as well. Basically anything that's eating both objects, that being meat or plant. The tertiary consumer, the one that's not on there then, would be the snake at the end. He'd be the one feasting on, the birds, other small reptiles, things like that to go in there. Some birds, like the bird here, would be in the omnivore category, though, because birds can also eat parts of the flower, parts of leaves, little oats, grains. Sometimes they go after berries. So you can chop them into that category there. Creating your own food chain, what we got is I gave you 4 animals to use here. We've got the algae. I'm going to draw little green circles to represent our algae. It's going to be our algae. They're then going to go into, and what you do is draw an arrow. They're going to go into, the next one would be the shrimp. Let's find a nice shrimpy color. And a lot of you drew it like you'd see shrimp in the, like a red lobster or something. That's really not how they would look necessarily. That's after they've been, deveined and declawed and all that kind of stuff in there. But hey, we can go with that. We would next have the sea bass, which I'm just going to draw something that looks like a fish. And then that would go into the shark. And I'm trying to draw this with a mouse right now. There's its big old fin. Rawr. And there's a side fin. There we go. Big old shark going on there. Terror of the deep. That'd be your food chain. That's how you'll set things up for how we do things. This would be the producer here. This would be the primary consumer. This would be the secondary consumer. And this would be the tertiary consumer. A lot of you use the abbreviations. That's absolutely fine. I'm glad I saw some of you do that to shorthand it, because it could be a little bit tricky to work in all those names in there as you're drawing them in there. But yeah, that's how you would set up the food chain there. You would then have the food web. Basically what a food web is, besides the food chain, the food web would be more of putting the food chains together to make it a little bit bigger. So connecting multiple food chains together, it shows how other things could be involved with each other. It just isn't one food chain happening, but they could be a part of multiple food chains. That's basically a food web at that point. We then have the energy pyramid, which basically just shows how you get your energy and how much energy you would get from eating other organisms. So it's important because everything needs energy in order to do their main basic functions. And where we get all that energy from the get-go is from the sun. It gets collected by the plants, and then the plants pass on that energy to the primary consumers. The primary consumers make it to the next level. And we have what is called the 10% rule, which means that you only get about 10% of the energy from the stuff that you eat, because everything else is being used by that thing when it's alive. So when the plant is doing all its plant business, it gets 100% of the sun's energy. But the plants have to do all photosynthesis. It has to grow. It has to develop its flowers. It has to make leaves. It has to make a stem. It has, in some cases for a tree, it has to grow real tall. That takes energy themselves. So it uses about 90% of the energy just to do its basic functions, leaving 10% of the energy to just be floating there, basically left in storage for when something comes along and eats it. It takes that 10% of the energy for itself. Now in that next creature, it's going to use 90% of its energy to do its basic functions, leaving 10% for the next level. So basically you get 10% of whatever you get at the next level. And it's just called the 10% rule. It's a general give or take about 10%. It's not an exact hard cut of 10%, but that's about where it's at, somewhere around there. It gives us some kind of estimation to shoot for. So what you're going to do with all this information, because that's the last part of our review there, is that you're going to open up our food chain webs worksheets. And what you're going to do today is answer a couple of questions based off of the food chains that you see here. So each one is divided out into part 1, 2, and 3. You're going to do all 3 parts here today. Part 1, you're looking at this specific food chain between the grass, rabbit, and the fox, and answer the 3 questions. This one, you have this picture of this food web, which has a bunch of them on there, and you have to answer a couple questions about the food web. The last one, you're using the energy pyramid down below here, and you're going to answer the 4 questions about the energy pyramid. You'll need to consult maybe the notes to go back, and those notes, the link is still attached to yesterday's post, so you can always go back and look at what you've missed. I know it's a little bit longer of a video here, but I went through and tried to explain everything to give you that feedback. So hopefully you're able to get some things from there or just verify that you were correct on some of those things. If you have any help, do not hesitate to ask. We definitely encourage you to be the ones to come into contact with us. So send out an email. We're sitting here usually between 8 and 3 waiting for you to email us, or we'll be me emailing lots of you out there. So make sure that you're asking for help if you need help. Other than that, remember, it's a great day to be a junior potter. And see you later.